am so thrilled today to talk with Robert Leonard. He is a contributor to the New York Times, Kansas City Star, Iowa Capital Dispatch, Des Moines Register, Time, and many other publications. Robert, I understand you cover rural issues, politics, agriculture, and that you interviewed more than 8,000 Iowans for KNIA and KRLS. Is that all accurate?
That's pretty accurate. It's probably a low estimate of the number of people I've interviewed, but it's just a lot of people. I mean, I went up in a balloon once and we landed in the yard of somebody that I'd interviewed. I mean, there are only 30,000 people in the county, so I know a lot of people.
So you know a lot of Iowans.
Yeah.
Well, I was thrilled to talk to you because I got my start in politics in Kansas and then Iowa. Iowa was really the formative place. I got married in Des Moines, Iowa, and was part of the Obama campaign and witnessed the journey that started with our motto, which was respect, empower, include. And that's where I wanted to start today, Robert, because we've just seen such troubling news yesterday with the death of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. It was political assassination. I know I'm heartbroken over it. I have many disagreements with him, but I believe that people should be able to speak their minds, as awful as you believe those views might be. And I was so worried about this moment and that we're living through such political violence. I mean, this has been a culmination of multiple events now that are happening. And I wanted to get your take because I remember, Robert, in the aftermath of the first Trump election, our team, our Paul Tooze, who was our state director, wrote everyone and said, you know, my mom this morning walked over to the person, her neighbor, who was a Trump supporter, and said, congratulations, and gave her coffee. And that's where I remember us being in Iowa. And I just wanted a temperature check. How are things in Iowa? What is it like today? And what are people thinking about this heinous attack on Charlie Kirk?
Well, I've talked to a number of people today, and it's pretty much like you would suspect other places in the sense that, oh, my friends on the right are, you know, very troubled by it. My friends on the left are troubled by it too, but it's it's a different kind of thing here. I think that how I agree with you completely. There shouldn't be any political violence, but Charlie Kirk just wasn't a very good human being. I mean, like one friend put it, he says, I'm not going to celebrate his death, but I'm not going to celebrate his life either. And so I think that sort of shares my sentiment. I lie awake at night, and I wrote once, when I can't sleep, I hear on the wind the dying screams of children in Gaza. I mean, in Ukraine, the USAID relief that was cut off of Africa that a researcher in Boston estimated were killing 106 kids an hour. And so in this giant sea of death and destruction that we have a hand in, the death of one person, to me, I mean, it's tragic, but it's not as tragic as the death and destruction that's happening the world around. So I wish we would spend as much time trying to resolve things in Gaza and Ukraine and, our own hungry children at home. So
I worry about the judgment, though, that we place. Like the very first thing is he a good person? I don't know. I didn't meet Charlie Kirk. I mean, I think that his wife certainly thinks that he's a good person. And I think you're right that there are so many problems right now, especially because I think America isn't the best version of ourselves. And so we can't show up for people as the best versions of ourselves. But I think to be the best versions of ourselves, that initial judgment of someone is part of our problem. Now, I agree with you. There are so many issues that I want to talk about. And, having seen the job of the president up close, I remember I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois. And, we lost Maytag, and there was a lot of frustration, I included, had with President Clinton and other administrations and what had happened before us. And we have believed in change we can believe in. We were a fresh start to George W. Bush. And then you end up finding out that that job is nearly impossible and that you cannot please everyone. And the decisions that a leader makes, I remember that we had a lot of people who thought President Obama could solve all the world's problems. I mean, he got a Nobel Peace Prize out of the gate. And then there was death and destruction then, and horrible death and destruction. And I think, I was back at our anniversary in Chicago of the election, and I watched him really struggle with the moment because it had been the outbreak of violence between Israel and Hamas originally, but obviously, the Palestinian territories was somewhere I went with President Obama. And I remember then it's if someone didn't think that President Obama wanted a two-state solution, they would be very misguided. He wanted a two-state solution. And yet what happens is I think so many complicated factors get involved, and we end up, getting into a war that's a religious war that has been ongoing for long before our lives have even started. And so to me, it's a false equivalency, I guess, if I'm not being wrong. Like, I care a lot about those problems. I want us to figure out how we can solve them. I think that the United States can only have that role if we can come together and have a more solid foreign policy that would rely on Democrats and Republicans working together. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right, but I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think that the Republicans want it to happen. They want division. They're using this. I mean, for example, one of the things that's happening here in Iowa, I know you're interested in Iowa, but there's this conservative, no, I'm not going to call it conservative because there's nothing conservative about the MAGA movement, but it's a MAGA news site with thousands of followers that are asking people to look at teachers' social media posts. And then they're gathering the teachers' social media posts that they don't like about Charlie Kirk, and they're, sending them, to the legislative leaders. It's become a witch hunt for teachers. Like, one teacher put up an image of a cloud, and then Karma did her thing. And so now they want that teacher fired for saying Karma did her thing.
Can I ask, Robert, like, as a mom, I had to text my son yesterday when I saw the news because I wanted him to know that this is not justified, that no one can justify it, that this is heinous. And so as a parent, I could actually see the concerns of people if teachers are saying something different. I mean, I I just keep wondering where we've lost our compassion and our empathy. And I understand he said things I would never agree with. He's called people heinous things. He's grouped people together. And yet I just worry that anyone would say murder at all is justified. So I mean, as someone who is, I side with, Ro Khanna and Elizabeth Warren on a lot of liberal agendas. I am very worried about the things that our kids are hearing. Like, we went through a pandemic and our kids, they feel this awfulness that we do to each other. They see it.
Well, you're obviously a very kind and compassionate person. I mean, and I admire you for that. but the ace, and I'm not saying that it's right, but I don't think that we should be using people's personal statements on Facebook to their friends to drive them from their profession. I don't think that we should do it for conservatives. I don't think we should do it for progressives. I just don't think that it's just more for the further destabilization of our public schools. So this fits right into their plans, and it's an asymmetry. I mean, if you listen to what President Trump said, about, how evil the Democrats are, and and Charlie Kirk, laughing about Paul Pelosi, and that terrible situation with him.
It's
And
awful.
yeah, I mean, so so they get to say all the nasty things they want to say, and then we have to take the high road. And we want
So
to take the high road. But
one thing I heard you say is actually an area that I think we could actually agree with people on is the anti-cancel culture. And what is private? What is public? What should cause someone to lose their jobs? Now, I am one who believes that a public official, and I hold the president to the same standard, has a higher standard, than anyone else. So I would say, our police and our teachers have such an important and vital role. And I've seen it firsthand. If your student is put with a teacher, not a good teacher, a bad teacher, they will lose years of their study. If they encounter a bad police officer, God only knows what could happen. I am one who believes in rooting out those who have the responsibility in our communities that do not cherish the responsibility they have as an educator, as a leader, and as a public safety official. I would say anti-cancel culture is one that, a lot of people like that is the question, right? Like there is a question of what crosses the line on, like someone sharing their views. I'm one who believes I'd rather hear someone's views than be surprised. So like if someone like Charlie Kirk has ideas that I found to be racist or abhorrent, I want to know where he's coming from. So I guess to your point, you're saying, with our crisis in public education, we don't have enough educators. I don't know how Iowa's doing. We don't have enough educators in California, and we have too many subs who are there because we don't have a permanent educator. So you're saying it's creating more of a problem, and what we should do is work together to root out anything that's going to overstep that line of our public trust. Is that right?
no, I don't think that we need a MAGA a MAGA website doing witch hunts on our teachers for something they say. There's something called the First Amendment. If it were in school, that would be a different kind of thing. I wouldn't be for that. I'm not really for posting controversial things. I mean, I've done enough, controversial things, just news reports, the New York Times saying that a Boston researcher says 106 kids are dying a day in Africa because we cut off aid to them. And so I will post things like that. But there's nothing that I thought I could say with respect to Charlie Kirk to my friends that would add anything to the dialogue. We're going to have our different opinions. And the thing is, and I know you want to know what it's like here in Iowa, but the
Yeah.
thing is, most of us get along really well. I mean, we know what the other person's politics are, and we don't talk about them unless they're a really dear, trusted friend. I've got like half a dozen friends that are close enough that we can argue, but it has to be good friends. Otherwise, I'm not going to go there because I don't want to offend them. I value their friendships. I think that with what Trump is doing with respect to the economy, with respect to Medicaid, with respect to SNAP, all of the kinds of things, they're going to learn from them by themselves. The tariffs, you name it, attacking the colleges, all of our institutions, bringing Robert F. Kennedy in charge of public health. They don't need me to tell them what's going to happen. They're going to learn it themselves, just like our farmers are learning it now with respect to the tariffs, and we're all learning it at the grocery store. So I just, I'm just sitting at home and had a buddy come over. He's going to do some concrete work for me, and he voted for Trump, and he and I had a really long, nice conversation. And so I think we try to deal with it at those levels. And
Yeah. Very
when I
personal.
yeah,
So, do you know if the MAGA site that's investigating teachers, is that homegrown in Iowa? Is that someone who's local who's got concerns?
yeah, it's homegrown. It's a guy that just goes a lot of places and repeats what he hears on Fox News. That's another thing that I do every day to help me understand my MAGA friends is I get up and I look at like 6 or 7 different sort of, old
News site.
mainstream news sites, and then I go to and I learn what the narrative is about what's going on in the world, and then I look at Fox News and Newsmax, and I learn what my friends don't know because of the very selective information that they're being presented by Fox News and the MAGA media. And you know what? If I listen to MAGA media every day, the economy is doing great. The tariffs are working fine. The
We're
farmers
living
are
in
doing
different ecosystems. We have
absolutely.
100% different information. And I'm seeing that in the aftermath of this. For those who are joining us, we started by talking about the death of Charlie Kirk and how Iowa is one of the places I learned politics, respect and power include, and how people do have conversations with people who have different opinions than them in person. But we are truly, I think, Robert, you just nailed it. Even when I talk to my dad, we get different information and we can be sitting next to each other and our phones are feeding us different information. But what I think that's led to, and, this is my worry, is that we believe the worst in each other. And we started talking a little bit about someone locally in Iowa has a MAGA news site where they're trying to find teachers in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk who have posted something that they find despicable and try to use that to get them fired. We talked about cancel culture and how it is a bit of cancel culture. And I believe it is heinous and not okay in this moment after Charlie Kirk's death to find any justification for someone losing their life. I make no judgment of who Charlie Kirk is. I had lots of judgment of what he said. I wish I could have convinced him that I that I believed he was wrong and that there were other things that we could look at together, but we will never have that chance because someone took a short-sighted action. And this is, we talked a little bit, Robert, about, my concern is if this had happened to Governor Shapiro right now, we would be talking about right-wing violence. We would be talking about how terrible right-wing violence is, how extremist right-wing violence is terrible, even before they catch the shooter or the, assassin. We keep blaming it on right-wing or left-wing violence, but isn't it all just violence? And how do we bring it down?
That's a really good point. And I don't know how we bring it down. I think that guns are a big problem, but here in Iowa, guns are tools. I mean, you use them to hunt varmints. People, go hunting. A lot of my friends are hunting. One of the things that we get, every fall is, pictures on Facebook where, a 10-year-old girl got her first turkey, and so guns are different here. And we have friends just like Charlie Kirk. People are outraged that Charlie Kirk said something like, having a lot of guns and gun deaths is the price of freedom or it's part of being American. There's a whole lot of people here that agree with that
Believe that.
100%. And so people are using that as a justification for saying, "Oh, karma, he's for guns being everywhere." Well, he's not the only one. Probably, I don't know, if we walked around the town square here together, I could probably find 10 people that would tell you the same thing in an hour.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a part of me, because my dad was an NRA member, and I know people who do have guns, I can understand the mentality that when people say, you know, guns aren't the person who pulled the trigger, it is a mentally unstable person. And I do feel like we have a mental health epidemic in America that has just been further made worse because of our social media world and the tools that we're using instead of in-person engagement. I mean, our kids are on devices too often. And I don't know if that's the case in Iowa. I hope it's not. One thing I've prioritized out here, Los Angeles County actually has an amazing program with the county with teen centers where they're in person. Kids can go for free and play in person. And I want so much more of that that we don't have.
Yeah, well, we just this year, the legislature banned cell phones in schools, and so hopefully things will get better. I don't know why there were cell phones in schools to start with, but that we've allowed them, and I know that technology is important for kids to be able to use, but there's a time for them and a time not for them. But we've just passed the law. It seems like it's going to help, but I don't, and it's hard for me to be judgmental about this because I'm as bad as any teenager I know with my phone.
Oh gosh, I know I always say my mom is worse than my son.
Yeah.
I hope she's on. Love my mom.
Yeah.
But it's we get sucked into these devices, and I think so often we don't even think about the things that we say and the the examples that we're setting for our own children. Um, and that's I guess, I just don't know when we're gonna wake up that, it's not just one party that's all the problem. It's not that, we can sit over here and judge and not feel like we've been part of the problem. I've been part of the problem. I believe all of us have a responsibility in this moment where we are facing such division that we can't trust each other. Um, I know I wanted to ask, has the neighborly respect for different viewpoints in Iowa survived despite the political polarization that we're facing? What do you think about that?
Well, a lot of it has survived. I mean, we just pretty much know each other and what each other's perspectives are, and we just go about not talking about politics. And especially when, I'm very worried about confirmation bias in
Mhm.
myself and where I get my information from. And so I'm respectful. I try to be respectful of other people and try to figure out where they get their information. But in general, we just avoid the topic. Well, what we'll do is occasionally, if there's a new person, we'll float sort of just a softball observation that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And if you say something, yeah, what do you think about these tariffs or something that's, it's just something worth talking about, by their response, you can tell what their political persuasion is, and then you can judge from then how to engage
Mm.
and how to engage most productively.
So I would think on the issue of the economy, it should be something that should cross party lines. We talked about I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois. Galesburg is one of the many places that lost Maytag. Also, Iowa faced similar plant cuts. I get frustrated because, of course, in 2004, President Obama talked about it on the Democratic National Convention stage. I remember going into the administration and I got in an argument with someone at a party about, how I did prioritize American manufacturing and American jobs. And I still believe, we have too many of our critical, necessities like antibiotics. The fact that we were getting our face masks from China, this is a national security issue. I believe that we have allowed businesses to ship jobs without consequence. And I understand that it's more complicated than even tariffs to just bring them back. But I guess, when Trump came into office on tariffs, I thought this is a lot at once, and I don't know how this is going to work. But Biden didn't take off the tariffs from China when he went into office. Are people having those kinds of tariff economy conversations? Because you're absolutely right. It's affecting farmers. And I don't know, like from what I've seen, I haven't seen plants coming back to Iowa. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there's been plant, I don't know, lots of layoffs, not plant closures. There's, a nearby corporation called, Vermeer. They make the big round hay balers and a lot of other kinds of things. It seems that they're doing well. It seems like some of the manufacturers have managed to survive, but others are downsizing. Jobs are, we're losing jobs all over. There's this plant in Marshalltown that shut down.
Mm.
And so people are they're starting to see this and feel it. But, when I walk around and I talk to people, I walked into a flower shop. A friend of mine runs a flower shop. I said, "How are the tariffs impacting you when they first hit?" And she says, "Well, one particular flower, a lily, that's in a lot of her arrangements went up $7. Everything in her store was made in China. So everything in her store, like 90% of it, now it costs 50% more. That's hurting her business.
And
Um,
she's selling her flowers, but it's the things that she has to put the flowers in, correct?
right.
Is that
Well, no,
so?
the flowers all come from South and Central America.
Most of the flowers or all of the flowers?
All of the flowers. And so all of those bouquets, I bought my wife a bouquet, for our anniversary, and it was twice the price and half the size as the one I got last year. So it's hitting the small businesses, our retailers. A woman that owns a clothing store didn't know what to do with her prices. I mean, there's just all kinds of things. The manufacturers I talk to, some of them are doing fine. Others, there's going to be layoffs. I've been told there will be layoffs, and it's happening. I mean, if only about, well, I heard that, a third of Iowa farmers aren't going to make any money this year. I mean, things are really down. And
What about the consolidation of small family farms? Has that continued? Are we in a position, where are we on how many family farms are thriving these days?
well, it's hard for the smaller farmers to make it. I mean, they don't have the economies of scale. I mean, if they have to share a combine, I mean, they don't have, you know, there are people that have fields in South Dakota, North Dakota, and Iowa, and they are using the same like 5 combines. And so they have the economy of scale, and our smaller farmers just don't have that. I mean, they're really being hit. They're really, the uncertainty is hurting them a lot, and they
Now,
don't know whether to buy equipment.
what would help them? Do we know?
Yeah, farmers want markets. I mean, we've been
They want
Governor
export.
Reynolds. Yes, Governor Reynolds is, I think she's still in India or just coming back on a trade mission.
Hmm.
Tariffs went up 50%. We've been working with India selling corn and soybeans
Yep.
to India since the 1960s. And all of a sudden, we have a trade mission. I would hate to be Governor Reynolds and go over there and say, "Hey, sorry about that 50% tariff thing."
Well,
I
and
mean,
at
so
this point in time, I mean, there are all sorts of issues that I have with India's government, but you are absolutely right. They have more people. Their population is just, grown over China. They are democracy, an imperfect democracy, aren't we all? But I would say, when you're looking at those kinds of markets, I remember in China, I think it was during the first Trump administration, China's leader ran for the UN Food and Agriculture chair, and they had just faced an issue in China where they had poisoned babies with baby formula and should not be in that position. They ended up buying a lot of votes from all of these small countries. But when I was looking at that, the Chinese consumers actually wanted U.S. organic products, but because of the government's they couldn't get them. Or, and it's also like if you're a small batch manufacturer, how are you going to get it there? You have to partner with other people. I have to tell you, I'm actually out here in the greater Los Angeles area. I work out of a location that has small batch manufacturers. And it's so interesting to see, them try to combine forces. You're absolutely right. If we have more markets, then you can sell more goods. But to get stuff on the ships and to get into those markets, it takes a lot of work. I mean, so Governor Reynolds is over right now on a trade mission in the aftermath of President Xi, of course, of China, just hosted India's leader alongside Putin and unfortunately North Korea's Kim Jong-un. We have not, unfortunately, sidelined those who are trying to pull the rest of the world away from America. So I think I see what you're saying is it's very hard right now, probably for Kim Reynolds to sell this idea of buying Iowa goods, not least of which because there's an extra cost, but also because, right now, I think we do this to ourselves. We fight so much. We are so terrible to each other that our reputation around the world is one of division. I mean, I was even on with a BBC woman who was telling me it's breaking through. Like, we are covering Charlie Kirk and this assassination. It's everywhere.
Well, and another thing is the big giant corporations, like Cargill and ADM and all the big, food processors, they don't care. These are American firms. They don't care where the soybeans and corn come from. If they can get it cheaper from Brazil, and the same thing for China, if they can get it from Brazil or Argentina, the farmers and the government officials have worked hard to stabilize and build long-term relationships. So you look a trading partner in the eye and you say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden, Trump kicks the legs out from under, the government officials, the farmers, the farm organizations. It's relationships that are built on generations of trust. They aren't rebuilt overnight.
No, no. And so in some ways, I wonder because what we were originally set up to talk about was Iowa's politics. Governor Kim Reynolds made a big decision to step aside. Of course, her husband was facing cancer, and so did Senator Joni Ernst. And I wrote about that, and I know was so grateful for your feedback. I was thrilled as someone who, when they were debating, Dianne Feinstein here in California, I said I wanted to be Senator Barbara Boxer, who had retired. So I was thrilled that there are some political leaders who are taking the moment to retire, to spend time with their families, not because I'm talking about their politics, but because it is so rare. I mean, even when we look at Chuck Grassley, who is not retired, who has still been in that office and has been in that office, I mean, likely like my entire life. And I've got a 13-year-old. I mean, I guess I'm really pleased to see them pass the torch. And now you have big open races in Iowa.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. But first, let me just say I have a friend. I have a couple of friends who've written about this. Ed Tibbetts, he writes something called Along the Mississippi. But two strong, powerful women in the Republican Party gone. They challenged Trump. Reynolds, her initial support was for DeSantis. Ernst didn't want Hegseth. I mean, she's been a bit of a thorn in the side. And so here, even if I disagree with them, here are two accomplished, strong Republican women that are now gone. And so I think that's I think that's interesting. I'm glad they're gone. There's some really interesting races. The governor race, a couple of Democratic candidates, Rob Sand, the only statewide elected Democrat. I talked with Rob today, Julie Stout.
Yeah,
She's
tell me what Rob's thinking. I remember back in the day when Rob, I think he was with Ed Fallon. We were debating, I think, at that point a long time ago. So Rob, but he's gone on to take positions of power and has really held people accountable. Am I right about that? And what's he kind of thinking right now in this moment?
well, I actually met with him this morning, and he's doing all these town halls. Republicans won't do town halls. He's doing them in every county, and I think he's doing two in Kossuth County or one county that has two county seats. But he's going to, do at least 100 town halls, and he's out there and taking all kinds of questions. He's all over the place, and this morning he wasn't as tired as I was. But I don't know. He's a strong candidate. He's talking about um, how important it is for him to be listening to Iowans and Iowans sharing their thoughts. The Republicans actually took away all of his power.
Mm.
They had to approve, the department heads in the state and Governor Reynolds had to approve him auditing government agencies. This was just ridiculous.
So basically, he lost the power to do audits of government agencies. I think this goes back into, the desire for transparency. I hear though, and I've been wondering for a long time why Republicans aren't doing more town halls. I do think they need to. And then, I didn't expect yesterday for Charlie Kirk to be assassinated. I think we need to bring down the political rhetoric so that everyone does political town halls. But I know already, because Ro Khanna was talking about this, that there are House members who are very worried for their security. And I wonder, did Rob say anything about whether he had any worries about political violence for himself this morning when you met?
He didn't say anything about it. He just expressed how important it was for our elected officials to talk to people, and the Republicans won't. And, because Ashley Henson has done some. She's, running.
Yeah, she's running for Johnny Ernst's seat, right?
Right. And she's done some, and they've been some are tough ones. Grassley's had some tough ones. Zach Nunn hasn't had one since he was elected. And he's,
Grassley's still
running
doing
again.
town halls?
He quit a couple months ago. There was one really, really, the one that got a little bit out of control in Hampton, I believe. But he wanders around. You never know where he's going to pop up. But
I just remember he was the one who would say, come this summer, you can't swing a dead cat at the farmer's market without hitting a presidential candidate. And I just always was like, why do we have to swing dead cats? Please don't swing dead cats, Judge
right.
Chuck Grassley. But I wonder, are people at these town halls asking about the issues we're talking about, like export markets, stability, I saw in the comments, certainty? What can a governor do when it comes to bringing back more manufacturing, especially if we're at a disadvantage because there are cheaper goods that our businesses are able to secure? Are they talking about those issues, or are most of the issues centering on Medicaid and some of the healthcare issues still to this day?
Well, yeah, they'll talk about Medicaid. I've attended lots of Rob's town halls over the years. I attended one a month or two ago, maybe last month. And he's talking about the economy. Iowa's economy is like the worst in the nation. Our water quality is worst in the nation. We've got this big, beautiful lake here in my county, Lake Red Rock, but it's, I grew up swimming in lakes like that and in creeks and stuff, but I wouldn't want my grandkids in them. I don't like
They're
my
not
dog.
clean.
No,
they're not
and
clean.
so water quality is becoming an issue, and Rob's talking about that. There's lots of reasons for that. Our high cancer rates, that's being talked about. Rob wants to focus on, the bread and butter, kinds of issues, the economy. Republicans here and everywhere focus on cultural war problems or issues, not problems. Even if there isn't a problem, they'll make one. And so there's a little bit of that. But
Is
Rob
that
is a problem
entirely
solver.
fair? Just stepping back, is that entirely fair? Because sometimes I find that, there is a conversation about the economy. And, I think a lot of times, Republicans, I mean, if I'm impressed that Governor Reynolds is in India trying to move that forward. Have they had any business wins that have helped Iowa businesses?
Well, I think individual businesses have, but things are pretty tough for the businesses. I mean, all of our elected officials, as long as since I moved back to Iowa, Republicans and Democrats alike have worked very hard to make the economy stronger. I mean, but we have a huge deficit now, in large part because we've been funding private school vouchers. And so anybody that
Yes.
wants to go to a private school, no matter how wealthy you are, we're going to pay, the taxpayer is going to pay for it. And so we have a big deficit. But there's lots of investments that need to be made. And, and Rob is talking a lot about, focusing on issues where there's real problems to be solved. For example, I know of no uh, trans person that was born male who's asked to participate in female and girl sports. It doesn't
Throughout the
exist.
state of Iowa.
Yeah,
I mean,
and so the
I always,
Republicans
I
want to make it one.
I was always surprised by that issue coming up time and time again because I just think I don't see it much and I'm in California. So I just can't imagine, there are more children who are abused by family members. There are so many problems that we have for the challenges that our kids are facing that I want us to take on together. But you're saying you hear more of the culture war type rhetoric.
Well, no,
I I hope that, if and this is my worry, is if we start talking to our neighbors and we start talking about issues, maybe we could even s- start going to things with people who we disagree with to try to hear what we hear and what they hear. Because, like you were talking about earlier, how we're sitting next to someone, who has a different political view. My dad and I can be sitting next to each other with our phones, and we are getting completely different news media, completely different feeds. And it's always enlightening to hear, where he's coming from. I guess, right now it feels like a lot of people aren't breaking out of that cycle. Are the people coming to the town halls and the events mostly people who agree, or are they pressing really tough questions?
well, one of the things that happened here in Iowa is the Republican legislature and Kim Reynolds took away rights from trans Iowans and made it legal to discriminate against them. And I was at the State House when that was signed. There were 2,000 people there when their rights were taken away, when they made it okay for landlords to say, I'm not going to rent you a house because you're trans. They made that legal. And then the anguish, watching, 1,000, trans people, gay people, just the anguish when you see people get their rights taken away, it's horrific. It was just horrific. I watched Iowans get their rights taken away. And a legislator that I knew came up to me and said, "Why are all these people here and why are they dressed so funny?" And I said, "Well, you're working to take away their rights. There's a lot of trans people here." And she said, "Oh, okay. So that explains why they're dressed the way they are." And then she went up and voted to take their rights away. And there were howls. There was
It's
it was just horrible.
it just feels to me like at the root, no one wants to be discriminated against. And, I've never lived an experience of being anything other than a woman, and I can't imagine the feeling of someone who doesn't feel like that. But I just think that there are so many pressing issues that we have in America, including, our unfortunately, our illiteracy rate. So many kids can't read. And so, what we saw actually out in Los Angeles, in a suburb, was a lot of parents were concerned that their kids couldn't read. And so, what ended up happening was a short sighted local political figure took advantage of the moment and got people very incited about sex ed and whether they were spending too much time on sex ed. And it was like, the root cause of this is that our kids can't read. It feels like to me we aren't getting to the root causes of a lot of frustration, and we're just continuing to talk about these issues that motivate people because, but there are issues that are not solved by government. I mean, this is this has been going on since the Equal Rights Amendment was debated. And Phyllis Schlafly was worried about bathrooms and who was going to go to what bathroom. And honestly, as a mom, I care more about, especially when my son was young, that he could go to a bathroom in which I had oversight of than anything about who's going in what bathrooms. I just think we get so distracted by so many of these issues. There is, as you said, and I want you to respond on that, and then we'll talk just a little bit more. And I know because we started a little late, we're running a little behind, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the races and what we're seeing in Iowa. But respond on that if you would.
Well, I mean, slowly here in Iowa, slowly over the last, 20 years, we haven't been funding our schools to the rate of inflation. And then we're incentivizing private schools. And why we're this is the same kind of thing happen everywhere. Republicans don't say government doesn't work. And so they underfund it and they guarantee that it's not going to work. They say the private sector can always do a better job. And that's not true. There doesn't have to be, major profits for, the mayor like there has to be for a CEO. But so what they're doing is they're trying to suck as much public money out of public
Public
entities
systems.
into private hands. I mean, that's this whole thing about voucher schools is about making people rich. I mean, that's what it's all about. And so our
Robert, I
public
shared
schools,
your frustration. Even with the Biden administration was saying public-private partnerships, they can solve all these problems because, they'll take the risk or whatever. And I just think we are part of the problem where we're siphoning off money that should be better protected in the public. And maybe we need to figure out a way in which there isn't so much liability and risk, and maybe lawyers are part of the problem. But this situation that we're in, I mean, I saw it with. I talked to a woman who was coming in on, working in the economic section with President Biden, and she was selling me on public-private partnerships. So are you seeing a backlash on that in Iowa? Because you would think Iowa is one of those places where we could see for ourselves that this isn't working.
well, the thing is that for a long time, public-private partnership just seemed like a really good idea. It just really did. But now we've seen enough of them that our services are suffering because I mean, it's like when Medicaid was privatized in Iowa, our services suffered. And when anything is privatized in Iowa, our services for the public suffer. I mean, it's like wait till they completely privatize the water, the fire department. Um, when you have to have a subscription to the fire department, or they're going to stand there and watch your house burn down. I mean, these are worst case scenarios, but we're using public money. We wouldn't want public money to be spent on a private road we can't drive on. We wouldn't want it spent on a private course that doesn't have to allow us to play. We wouldn't want it to be on a private pool that our kids and grandkids can't swim in. Why the hell are we paying
for
sending
private schools.
public money to private schools. It's ridiculous.
Because people have learned to distrust the system, and I was there at the point where, the system was changing. Even, I was born 1982 in Galesburg, Illinois, but I grew up a little bit along the Mississippi. So I was in Keokuk for a while, where my dad had a brewery, later, much later. But he was working for Pizza Hut along there, and I was in Davenport for a while. And I will say, I'm a big believer in public schools, 100%. But there is something when I know there were teachers that were not at the level, and my education suffered because of that. I often think about, I have siblings who had IEPs, and I remember at one point, my one of my siblings had dyslexia, and one teacher called them dumb, deaf, and stupid. And that drove distrust. I know my mom had to go through every different system to make sure that her kid could get the education that they deserved. And that's very challenging for people. So they turn off to the public systems. And I think one of the things that Democrats, yes, we need to fund them, but we need to also make sure that they work. And I think you have to talk about those two things in tandem. Are you seeing that in the debates? I mean, this is early in the in this next cycle, so I'm not expecting all of these things have already come out, but are you seeing people, not just talk about why are we giving our money to private schools, but also how can we make sure our public schools are excellent?
Yeah, people are talking about that, and teachers feel beleaguered. They're called groomers. They're called all kinds of names. Minnesota pays a lot more than Iowa. We're losing a lot of our teachers to Minnesota. Um, they feel overwhelmed. The teachers that I know and talk to say that a lot of the problem is the parents. The parents aren't investing in the kids like they used to. And
They're so
our
busy
youngest,
working 2 jobs in some
yeah,
cases. I mean, it's like I often see, that as a symptom of my mom stayed at home with us. I have a dog who's just stood up, and if anyone sees in the corner here, the dog has just stood up. But I feel like it's so unaffordable that there's no way. I mean, it's very hard to make the decision for one parent to raise children, and I think we undervalue the job of raising children. We did it when it was women. We're doing it now, regardless of who it is. So I hear you. Huge concern. I don't know that we're addressing that. And unfortunately, I do hear those kinds of things being talked about when they're talking about raising our children, in MAGA circles. I want us all to be talking about that.
yeah. I mean, clearly there are issues. I mean, everybody that I know is working. I know people that are working 3 jobs, especially women working 3 jobs, doing Etsy on the side and doing church on Wednesday night.
Yes,
I
and
mean,
they have to be in charge of everything for the PTA. Like, I've been there.
right.
You're in charge of the foundation. You're in charge of all of the, uh, the fundraising for every single school thing, and you're doing so much. It's like, it's no wonder people are exhausted.
Yeah. And then that you don't have time to pay attention to what's on the news, what's happening. There's a whole lot of people I know that probably don't even know who Charlie Kirk was.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to ask you because it is early in the process. It has been hard as a distant observer to predict Iowa lately. I mean, we even saw Ann Seltzer, who, I mean, I remember the gold standard of Iowa polls, famously accurate. And I mean, to the point where we got the poll right before Obama's election, and we were like, do not believe it, get everyone there, because she had predicted the margin. Um, but she got this last one wrong. Uh, why is it become so hard to predict? And what can we see? What's changed in Iowa that can help us predict what's going to happen this next time around?
Yeah, Ann Seltzer is just really a wonderful person. Is, one of the best pollsters around, and she just totally blew it on this last poll for the Register. And I've talked with people more knowledgeable than I that just said that know, she weighted some things that in ways she shouldn't have, and it was just, it was a statistical error, a statistical sampling and weighting error. That's what it
It
was.
could have been the same mistake I made because I remember 2022. I was doing News Nation. I was doing election night for 9 hours. We did. And I remember all the conservatives walked in. Morgan Ortegas was my counterpart. She said, "Oh, Johanna, you're going to have an awful night." And I was like, whatever the voters say, we'll see what happens. And then 2022, we ended up winning many races. And I thought that was going to be the same electorate making the judgment this time around. And I was frustrated that the Democratic Party, one, did not challenge Joe Biden because I thought we needed to. Two, when Joe Biden stepped aside, that it was basically, just a coronation instead of an actual contest. I thought there should have been some sort of contest, abbreviated as it could be, for the electors, something. We did not do that. And then we got into this position where we had a candidate, and I believed we were going to be like 2022. And so I wonder if it was a similar forecasting in which you didn't expect as many people who were not traditional voters to show up. And then I don't know, what was your voter turnout like in Iowa?
I don't remember exactly. I think it was about average. But what happened is I have a friend who was a poll watcher in the nearby town of Pleasantville, and he's a farmer, and he just watching the polls, and he said between 5:30 and 6, all of a sudden, all kinds of young men in work boots walked in, and he talked with them, and for some of them, it was their first election. And it was just way. I mean, town has 1,500 people, but I mean, it was young men coming in with mud on their boots that have never voted before, and there's no way Ann Seltzer could get to those young men. Those young men are listening to all the bro podcasts or listening to Fox News, and if you talk to a young white man
There's
today,
bro podcasts on our side, by the way, too. Like my former colleagues are bro podcasts. So
are
I
they?
think there's a lot of bro podcasts out there, which I don't know that it's always healthy. But
Yeah,
they were
I,
listening to specific bro podcasts. So
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's a different media system,
yeah.
and those young men aren't being reached, but they voted, and I think that's part of the reason.
Well, what I hope is that people don't not engage, that they keep showing up. And I hope we make ourselves, that we learn about the issues, that we try to engage in these kinds of debates. I mean, I loved being part of the Iowa caucuses. When I was at the University of Kansas, I remember thinking, why does Iowa have the caucuses? That's no fair. And I had grown up a little bit in Iowa and a little bit in Illinois, and I still was like, oh, that's no fair. And then I went to Iowa with, I was there before for gubernatorial, and then I was there in the early days of the, Obama campaign. And it was so accessible to put people in the ground, to talk with people, to have really interesting conversations. Two, you know, people change their mind. Like I remember, the Iowans who would be famously undecided, and you'd see them go to like every event, and it's like, they're still undecided. They're still undecided. And they took it so seriously to make sure that they were vetting the candidates. My hope is that that's what we're doing still, and that we're talking about like these real issues of like, how do we bring manufacturing back? How do we increase our exports, our markets, like you said? How do we restore trust and excellence in public schools? How are we solving healthcare? I want the candidate who says the truth that a single payer system would be cheaper than what we have right now. I want them to spell it out with a plan, and I want to see it enacted. And I understand that there are so many people who say that they're against it, but when you have Holly from Missouri standing up for Medicaid, you know that this is affecting their base too. So I would love to see that kind of a candidate emerge on the scene and get those hard questions. I guess we'll have to see. I mean, right now we don't know the status of Iowa, right? Because the Democrats are still debating.
Well, yeah. And I mean, Iowa gets blamed for the caucus, you know. Well, first, Joe Biden didn't like the caucuses because we didn't like Joe Biden. He
Because
did
there
the
were
best
many times he lost. He
Yes.
lost and lost to us. And then I remember Axelrod being like, he is such a heart and soul guy. And then to see Axelrod's complete evolution on Joe Biden was like, ooh.
Yeah, I know. So he ripped him away from us. I was there. The Tom Perez hated the caucuses. He shoved an
Mhm.
untested app down our throats. I was standing over the chair of behind the chair of a poll worker, a friend of mine, who was entering the data into the app. And she's turned and looked at me and said, the app doesn't work. So, Tom Perez, Joe Biden, destroyed the caucuses. And it was their fault. It wasn't Iowans' fault. And so I think that Iowa, it's in our law, we should have the caucuses. And I,
Yes.
and I understand all, the problems about accessibility, et cetera, but I followed enough um, people going door knocking around, asking people what their preferences are for, the caucuses. And last time, I don't know how many old people or handicapped people that I saw, they said, I don't care, just beat Donald Trump or, beat the
Mhm.
Republican, depending upon the cycle. And I think that we should do what we want to do. The DNC destroyed it. We shouldn't care what the National Party says. What are they going to do to us?
So I'd say two things. I was hoping, I had high hopes for Ken Martin. He was at the University of Kansas before me. I was hoping to see a different debate and dialogue. I did get all the notes from their last meeting where they were discussing the process. And I get a little frustrated when people are talking about the demographics of different states instead of talking about the price of the states, because I believe there's too much money in politics. And if you find a low cost state, then there are candidates who can get across in different media markets. They can put boots on the ground. They can get people there. I also get very frustrated, when we write off Iowa because it was Iowa that put Barack Obama in the position of winning Indiana, which I never would have expected that we won. We won North Carolina. We won in states that we had not won. We've now got, really a governing majority in Colorado. That was not the case then. That is because a state like Iowa, which was affordable, was first. So I think that the argument needs to be made differently. And I would also say, I really want to try to um, counter this notion that we don't need to win certain demographics. We got to win every demographic. Like the idea
Exactly.
that we're having a race on who should be the demographic to choose, like I want it to be a cheap state and I want to win every demographic, period. And that's not the debate that's being had right now. And I hope that Ken can find his Jayhawk roots and maybe we can have that conversation at some point. But I would not say Iowa doing its own thing solves the problem for the whole Democratic Party. And I think that's part of the problem right now is
Well,
that,
I think so too. And they're burning money doing all these silly surveys about how to talk to young men. Just go talk to some young men. I mean, and
put
burning ads
field
now.
organizers on the
Yeah,
ground.
yeah.
Like,
No, you have my vote.
pay people. Pay people in states to talk to people. Like,
Yeah.
have conversations. Oh my God. How is it, Robert, that this is something that, they have to get consultants to tell them. Like, that's the other goal that I have is like, hopefully, we'll see what happens this next cycle, but that whole model of like consultants has to change. Like, too much power, too much money in this instead of good ideas. So, Robert, I am so grateful for you, for your perspective on Iowa, for your boots on the ground, literally, for your conversations that you're having with people from both parties, for you sharing that. And my hope is that we can keep this dialogue going because I do think, right now, races are driven by money because they need media, they need oxygen. And so if we change that dynamic, hopefully we can get better leaders. What do you think?
I think absolutely. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. I love your work. I'd, I'd have you replace Ken Martin in a heartbeat. So, just thank you
Oh,
for
Ken.
inviting me, and yeah, well, let's talk again.
It's an unenviable position, I guess he's in, isn't it?
Yeah,
But yes, I know we started on Charlie Kirk, and I know there are people that have multiple different perspectives who are in this live, and I appreciate you all. I appreciate you sharing what you had to say in the chat. I also want us to recognize that, freedom of speech is something that I believe is imperative. And that means people are going to say things that we fundamentally disagree with. And I want to hold a place for people to disagree also with me. Send me an email. Let me know if you think that I'm wrong about everything. I am no worries about that. Very, very grateful to you, Robert, and for this conversation. I hope that Charlie Kirk's memory can serve as a reason that we continue respectful debate with one another.
agreed.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to sign off and press end here. So thank you so much for everyone joining us. Bye bye.
Bye.